Africa has some of the fastest growing economies in the world. However, to sustain this rapid development, the continent needs a constant supply of electricity while protecting and preserving the environment for future generations.
Hundreds of millions still lack access to electricity in Africa, but things are bound to change for the better.
Africa is tired of being in the dark, and Africa cannot develop in the dark.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Africa Today. I'm Mubarak Henia.
And I am Sheila Nelima. Today we are focusing on efforts to boost renewable energy production in Africa to meet the continent's development aspirations.
In our program today, we are also discussing about African startups and the challenges of racism that African entrepreneurs and IT specialists face in their own countries.
As usual, I will also be presenting you with a variety of news and events from across the continent and, of course, your comments on social media. So stay tuned.
Renewable energy in Africa. Pre-COVID-19, Africa had some of the fastest growing economies in the world, and the trend is expected to continue after the pandemic is over. Economic development in Africa is tied to sustained growth in the power sector. The president of the African Development Bank elaborates here.
Africa is tired of being in the dark, and Africa cannot develop in the dark. Just take a look at how lack of electricity drags down Africa's growth and development. For decades, Africa has continued to export raw materials. As it does, it is subject to global commodity price shocks, as we are already witnessing today. The reason why Africa exports raw unprocessed materials is simple. Africa does not have electricity. The lack of access to power has pushed Africa down to the bottom of global value chains.
Africa does not just need electricity, but it needs to tap its electricity from clean and renewable sources to preserve the continent's environment for future generations.
According to the International Renewable Energy Agency, Africa is rich in renewable energy sources, including hydro, sun, wind, and others. And what is needed is proper planning to tap the energy.
The agency says decisions made today will shape the continent's energy sector for decades. To discuss this issue further, we are joined by Simon Kiragu Muigai, a Nairobi-based energy consultant, and Dawi Root, the chief economist, Efficient Group in Pretoria.
Now let's start off with Mr. Kiragu Muigai. Thanks a lot for your time. Now, Kenya is among the African countries with good progress in the field of renewable energy. What is the current state of energy supply in Kenya, and what actions have been taken there to promote renewable energy as a viable alternative?
Oh, thank you. So our current installation of energy is about 2.3 gigawatts. This comprises of 57%, which is hydro. We have 32%, which is thermal. And solar and wind account for less than or about slightly above 1%. Still on the consumption side, we have about 68% that rely on biomass. 68% of the total population of the Kenyan population, which is about 44 million people. And we have people using petroleum-based energy, which is about 22%, and the electricity about 9%. So when I talk of the installed capacity, runs about 1,429 megawatts, and which is a shortfall because our demand is about 1,600 megawatts.
Thanks for that, Kiragu Muigai, Nairobi-based energy analyst.
As Kiragu Muigai mentioned, wind energy is one of the renewable energy sources that Kenya is tapping. Last year, this East African state launched Africa's largest wind power farm in a bid to boost electricity. The Lake Turkana Wind Power Project is also touted as the single largest private investment in Kenya's history.
We started construction in October 2014, and the turbines and the wind farm was ready for connection to the national grid on the 27th of January 2017. And we finally got connected to the national grid on the 24th of September 2018. This is probably one of the most complex project financings that has been done also for a renewable energy project in this continent.
An international consortium of lenders and producers, which includes the African Development Bank and the European Investment Bank, came together to install the 365 wind turbines at the Turkana Wind Power Project. The total cost of this project was around $700 million. Protection of the environment was a major incentive for international lenders supporting the Turkana Wind Power Project.
The construction of the biggest wind farm in Africa in one of the most remote and inaccessible areas of Kenya is an impressive show of expertise in logistics and engineering. And it's a dream come true.
When I look in front of me now and I can see these row of turbines, it's something that we had seen for 9 years on plans, on paper. To see it now that it's really happening, it's a great satisfaction.
And now we are joined by Dawi Root, the Chief Economist at the Efficient Group in Pretoria. Thanks a lot for your time. As we have seen here, Kenya was able to attract international financing for its wind power project. Now, how can other African countries or governments solve the challenge of financing renewable energy projects which require massive investments?
When you talk about the question about where the funding is going to come from, it's actually a question on whether governments or states can fund this. And the answer is in many instances simply no, there just is not capacity on their fiscal accounts. But I do believe that the private sector can provide the necessary investment in energy sources or renewable energy investments. And for the private sector to invest in renewable energy, of course, the other things are important. Other things like, for example, the protection of private property rights, to fix certain institutions in Africa, like, for example, a working government, and like, for example, a working judiciary and things like that. So I don't really look at governments to provide funding for energy or renewable energy in Africa. I think the private sector is the only real potential source for this.
Thanks for that, Dawi Root in Pretoria, South Africa.
A World Bank report says 1 in 3 people lack access to electricity in Africa, of which 87% live in rural areas. Efforts to improve these figures have been initiated through the exploration and development of renewable energies throughout the continent. Solar energy has gained popularity in Africa due to its many advantages, including accessibility and affordability to most homeowners. A solar power expert in Rwanda explains here on its accessibility.
Renewable energy, specifically solar, is very important because the grid transmission line is not spread out in the whole country. So we need sources of energy closer or produced within the community, within the area, in order for people to access the energy.
What would be the economic impact of increased use of renewable energy in Africa?
Africa is especially well situated geographically to really tap into that energy source, especially solar. And that can be used for things like, for example, office blocks, and it can be used for houses. Unfortunately, renewable energy is not really suitable for so-called baseload.
As COVID-19 hits the fossil fuel industry, a new UN report shows that renewable energy is more cost-effective than ever, providing an opportunity to prioritize clean energy in economic recovery packages and bring the world closer to meeting the Paris Agreement goals. Can African countries rely on renewable energy to drive the continent's economic growth?
And when you talk of increased shares of renewable energy in the energy mix, is one way to improve the quality of economic growth. So what basically that means is that renewable energy consumption has significant positive impacts on inclusive growth, right? So by this, we are talking of increased GDP. Based on the inclusive growth, because when you have high numbers of employment, then you have a greater value of GDP in a country if you have more people employed.
Speaking during the inauguration of the massive Lake Turkana wind power project, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta said the commissioning of the project is a testament of Kenya's commitment to pursue clean and renewable sources of energy.
This occasion signals our continued commitment to honor our pledges to the people of the Republic of Kenya. And we are doing this by ensuring that the electricity needed to power our shared aspirations for social economic transformation of our land and nation is generated from clean, renewable, and green sources of energy. My administration is on course to realize sustainable development, which is anchored in intergenerational equity by utilizing the resources and potential of today without compromising the Kenya of tomorrow.
The anticipated economic development in Africa post-COVID-19 will largely depend on bringing electricity to over 600 people in the continent who are still in the dark. Renewable energy will certainly be the key to a brighter and developed Africa.
And now let's see what my colleague has in store for you on our news and events segment from across Africa. What do you have for us today, Sheila?
Thanks, Henia. This week we touch on education, investment, pirates, and much more. Now first, the South African government is seeking private investors for its national carrier, the South African Airlines. The carrier needs at least $583 million US. Negotiations are already underway with received proposals. They purpose to resume operations by year-end. Now on to Africa's children. The World Health Organization and UNICEF have recommended a range of measures for the reopening of schools. This is in a bid to encourage governments in Africa to promote the safe reopening of schools. Surveys carried out by the organizations revealed that education disruption had led to an increase in exposure to violence and exploitation. Now, Somali pirates are at it again. A Panama-flagged ship was hijacked, the first since 2017. The ship was traveling from the United Arab Emirates to the port of Mogadishu. Attacks had been said to have reduced due to better security protocols. Now, investments are paying off for the government of Tanzania. President Magufuli's government invested in the improvement of educational infrastructure both in Zanzibar and mainland Tanzania. The examination results showed a positive performance, with public schools dominating top positions as compared to private schools. Now, the African Continental Free Trade Area officially opened in Accra, Ghana. This was a major milestone towards Africa Union's Agenda 2063. The project creates a market of 1.2 billion people with a combined gross domestic product of $3 trillion US. Now over to the animal kingdom. The Somali elephant shrew that had been thought to be extinct for more than 50 years has been rediscovered in Djibouti. The mammal is about the size of a mouse, an insect eater, and an apparent lover of peanut butter. In fact, it was a peanut butter trap that led it out from its hiding. Well, now we have come to the end of this part. Visit our social media pages to stay updated on the latest news around the continent. Please stay tuned. We have more coming up.
Digital colonialism.
African tech startups had the best year yet in investments in 2019, as 311 companies received $491.6 million in funding. This is according to the African Tech Startups Funding Report 2019.
However, there is controversy over what actually is an African tech startup. The reason for divergent opinions on this issue is quite a simple one. The Guardian recently reported that African entrepreneurs endure humiliation, discrimination, stereotyping in interactions with some of the world's most prominent investors.
Kennedy Nganga, a geospatial engineer, explains how he was exploited by European investors.
I'm out here struggling to make ends meet while other people are enjoying the fruits of all of my innovation, all of my knowledge and everything.
To discuss this issue further, we are joined by Alexander Powers, an African affairs analyst. Thanks, Mr. Powers, for your time. What's your take on reports of racism perpetrated by Westerners in African startups?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think it's partly cultural. I think there are a lot of factors also affecting Africa direct investment. Some of it has to do with the fact that there's not a lot of capital markets. You start a company here, you build it up, you can't exit easily. There's a lot of corruption. The legal systems in most of these countries are not very good, and it makes it complicated for foreign investors to come in and invest. Is there racism? Yeah, probably, but I think you can't put the whole issue on racism in itself.
Thanks for that, Mr. Powers. Stay tuned for more.
A Victoria Ventures analysis found that in Kenya, for instance, only 6% of startups that received more than $1 million in 2019 were led by locals. Now, to make matters worse, even startups led by locals faced a hostile environment. A 26-year-old woman who founded Kenya's first digital-only car insurance company gives her take on the challenges she faces as an African woman in her industry.
When I was meeting with people, they would be surprised to see that it was actually me. A lot of the CEOs here are not only men, but also foreigners. So then it becomes this huge problem where you look around, you don't really see faces like mine or younger people or women particularly. So I think that's something that we need to change.
Global heavyweights such as Goldman Sachs, Stanford University, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Andreessen Horowitz, and Sequoia Capital have all invested in startups started by white founders in Africa more frequently than they have invested in firms led by Black Africans. To deal with this problem, some experts argue that giving entrepreneurial skills and adequate funding for young Black businesses across Africa can help in dealing with the challenges posed by these multinationals.
Black entrepreneurs are not, Black people are not without ideas. We're not without the ability to see it. We see it. What we don't have is once you see it, where do you go?
Mr. Powers, you mentioned about investments. There are many millionaires in Africa. Why have most of them failed to invest heavily in the continent's startups?
That's a tough question because I think some of them have, just not on the tech side. Dangote and some of the other big names have built their empires up, and they've either acquired or started their own ventures. So I don't know if that's completely correct. From the tech side, I think there's probably a level of sophistication, but it is true. You don't see traditional African wealth reinvesting back in the continent as you would see in some of the Western cultures. So that is a problem for startups, and it is affecting the growth of the continent.
Thanks for that, Mr. Powers, African Affairs Analyst.
Many Western and especially U.S. tech firms are aiming to control the digital ecosystem and therefore the entire movement of data for the African continent. U.S. tech firms have covert objectives, and this partly explains why many well-funded startups they establish in Africa are not led by Black Africans. Western tech companies extract, analyze, and own user data for profit, market control, and other forms of intelligence gathering with little or no benefit at all to the data source.
A lot of these companies aren't African, they're not even based in Kenya, in Africa, forget Kenya alone. So what is a Kenyan citizen supposed to do when an American company uses their data, sells their data, markets it, as a product, and without their consent, without their ability to intervene, to appeal to a court system? That's kind of the gray area that we're falling into with a lot of these big, tech companies.
Is digital colonialism a reality?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's of course the big players are from the West and they have a certain monopoly. But remember, now maybe it's not feasible, but in a perfect world, the internet is an open system. So anyone can create a new technology or clone an existing technology and be able to compete in a local market. So, you know, Africa is wide open right now. There's a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs, particularly in the blockchain space, crypto, you know, online businesses. Africa is developing. There's not a lot of competition. And even the big players, they can't really compete here other than maybe Google, Facebook, you know, Twitter. But, you know, you still could create your own platform here and get a lot of Africans to follow you because they're really patriotic. They're excited about the growth of their continent.
While protests have been held to protest physical racism across the United States, it appears a new dimension of racism has taken root in the form of digital racism. Just like in other forms of racism, Africans are the major victims here, as we have seen in our program today.
Additionally, African countries that endured brutality of slavery and colonialism are now facing digital colonialism from the same countries that colonized and plundered their lands.
So if you look at the digital economy right now, you have a situation in which you have this data colonialism, which is a process of taking all this data, extracting it out from all over the world, and processing the data, and then spitting back out services to people. And their local economies can't compete because of the concentration of resources and the fact that these companies have already taken over these markets.
Thanks for staying tuned. Now it's time to see what you, our viewers, had for us this week. In our episode on albinism in Africa, we had Steve Tosh saying, "Insightful. People should get to know them for their identity and not for what they look like. It's only a shortfall in melanin." We also had Pezeshke Bedune Mars saying, "Dr. Imadi is one of the best Iranian doctors. God protect him for all the people of the world." We also had at iCloud2 stating, "Albinos are white Europeans, first name and first given, so don't get mixed up with born European albinos and infectious black Africans with albinism." Well, one of our own, Saima Karimpour, replied to that saying, "The definition of albinism is an organism with complete absence of melanin, and albinism can be defined as a congenital disorder." The program was based on the medical aspect of albinism in general. We also had Linda Oliver on our coverage of the Nile dispute asking, were the talks successful? Well, Linda, the Nile Dam talks are still ongoing. Watch out for updates on this and so much more. Want to find out what's happening in the African continent? Then follow our pages on Twitter and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you, so tag us in your posts, images and videos, and we shall share them right here for you.
Well, there's still much more to be discussed on this subject of digital racism and colonialism, but unfortunately our time is up for today.
We do welcome your comments on this and other episodes of Africa Today.
And you can also send us suggestions on topics you would like to see our experts analyzing here.
You can send us your comments on our Twitter and Instagram handles as they appear on the screen.
Thanks a lot for tuning in. It's goodbye from me, Mubarak Henia.
And me, Sheila Nelima, and the entire team.